Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm, and you are tuning into a very special Fierce Factor Encore episode. I've pulled out a few of my very favorite interviews with fierce women in aesthetics who create, inspire, and disrupt the status quo. I hope you enjoy this powerful discussion as much as I did. Without further ado, here's your power-packed episode spotlighting fierce women in aesthetics. Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. I have to admit, this is a little bit of an interview that I selfishly was dying to have because I found this woman on Instagram and she caught my eye because she acts and shows up and educates and networks and commands the room, the virtual room, like she has been doing it forever. And yet she is a fifth-year plastic surgery resident in Albany, New York. And she is this young, brilliant, beautiful physician who is just barely budding and blossoming into what I know is going to be a superstar. And I told her that of all of the plastic surgery clients I work with, I feel like they often talk about their residency years like it was erased from their memory. Like kind of like when I was in labor, I just don't even remember going through the pain of having a child. I just like forgot it happened. There's like a PTSD or something. And so I was kind of dying to talk with her about what residency was actually like. And I know from watching Grey's Anatomy and having sidebar conversations about certain elements or aspects of residency, but I thought it would be pretty cool to talk with somebody who is in a position in her life where she has put so much time and dedication and determination into getting to a point where she is, most of us at 30 years old have already have our college degree and we're going into our jobs, or we've had our jobs. I was already having children, married, the whole thing. And yet she's just starting to sort of venture out into what is going to be, the future of her life. And so I just think there's such a unique time for someone like her. I also am fascinated by the tenacity that is embedded into someone like her, who she tells her story about being born in India. And it's super cute. Her parents didn't want her to learn English because they wanted her to stay aligned with her culture. And she tells a cute story about coming home from kindergarten with notes on her tacked her shirt that she needed to learn English. And here she is today, such an accomplished physician, graduated from the University of Michigan, a double major, Spanish and brain behavior and cognitive science, before attending medical school in Chicago. Did 2 years of general surgery, went to Johns Hopkins, and is now an integrated plastic surgery resident in Albany. And she's, anyway, beautiful to look at and talk to, but also beautiful soul. And she has a little bit of a fire in her belly. I can just see when I talk to her, she's very sharp. She's very intellectual. She's smart, but she's determined. And I just think she embodies what we talk about as the Fierce Factor on this podcast. So I chat a lot with her about residency and what it's like being a plastic surgery resident and kind of the process of becoming one and what's next for her. And I'm super excited to share her story. And obviously she has some super inspirational words about the little things in life and how the little things you do create habits, and that you may think that the small steps that you're taking to get to that big goal don't matter, but they really do. So without further ado, I'm super excited to share this interview with you with Dr. Deepa Bhat. Enjoy. Hey, welcome to the Fierce Factor. Thanks for joining us, you guys. I am so excited to have our special guest, She is Dr. Deepa Bhat, and I hunted her down on Instagram like the little stalker bee that I am, because I was so fascinated with her just fierce dedication to getting out and inspiring women and men and people in our industry, and some of the stuff that she has done through Life Through Loops, developing her own platform. And what I thought was so special is that she is a 5th-year plastic surgery resident, and I happen to believe that I have a very sharp eye for young talent. So I'm just saying, remember the little people in a few years from now. So welcome, Dr. Bhat, to the show.
Thank you so much, Kelly. First of all, I want to thank you for having me on the show. I'm so honored that you'd want a resident to come and talk to you. So I'm super excited about this.
So it's funny you say a resident to come, because I am so fascinated with the fact that you are a resident, because I work with, I don't even know, I've lost count with how many clients, and in the plastic surgery space, especially when I ask about the residency, it's like they almost have PTSD. It's like, when we were having our pre-chat, I told you it reminded me of like having my kids, like you forget about labor, like nobody remembers their residency. And so I'm like, I want to know what this residency thing is all about. So first of all, I think it's so fascinating. You're drop dead gorgeous. You're probably older than you look because you've been to school for so long. So I'm assuming you're older than I think you are. But
I'm 30.
You're 30. Okay. So you're in the 3. Yeah. You're in the, So what I think is so cool is like, I want to talk with you about how you, as a young female, are really navigating a, let's call it predominantly male space, and also in the specialty and in a very sophisticated, like cutthroat environment. And I want to know a little bit about you and what it took to get you to where you are now. I'm sure that a lot of these same characters are going to be what propel you and your success going forward. But I already told our listeners a bit about kind of your CV on paper, but I want to peel the onion a little bit about and get to know Deepa, the woman. Tell me a little bit about you and how you became who you are today.
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, I'm a 5th-year integrated plastic surgery resident in Albany, New York. And just going way back, I was born in India. I immigrated here with my parents when I was 2. So I really did grow up in the United States. I grew up in the Midwest. I went to the U of M for undergrad. I double majored in Spanish and BBCS, and then decided I wanted to go to medical school. I felt like I wanted to leave town for a bit. So I went to medical school in Chicago at Rush Medical College. And I'll be honest, when I started med school, I had such little idea of what different surgical specialties entailed. I had no idea what medicine really entailed. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I was not meant to be a surgeon. So, not knowing very much about the field, there's a stereotype that it's very aggressive, very male dominated. And in certain cases, yes, that is definitely true. But once I started rotating through the different fields within medicine, I fell in love with surgery. And I found the opposite to be true. I found surgeons to be incredible teachers, very warm, kind people, actually. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with operating and being able to affect immediate change to people, because I think I'm someone that likes to see results quick, and it was just such a good fit for me. So that's how I fell in love with surgery. My program actually didn't have a very robust plastic surgery program at that time where medical students were able to rotate, et cetera. So I didn't really know that much about plastic surgery. So I actually ended up applying to general surgery. And it was really when I was a general surgery resident and I realized that I loved the reconstructive aspects more than our aspect of it. Like, for example, with breast cancer, it was so cool to me that you could reconstruct a woman's breast out of essentially nothing and, make her feel whole again, make her feel like herself, give her identity back. And that really spoke to me more than even the act of taking the cancer out. So that's how I got interested in plastics.
Wow. So you double majored originally in Spanish and BBCS. Will you explain what that is?
Yes, sorry, I kind of skimmed over that. So BBCS stands for Brain Behavior and Cognitive Science. I decided to double major because one, I knew that I was never going to be able to take Spanish classes again. And BBCS is essentially, I'll liken it to a biopsychology degree. And I knew that this was the last opportunity I was probably going to get before medical school to study literally anything I wanted. Because after that, it's all science. I love languages. English is my third language. So learning languages is really fun to me. Spanish is very useful. It ended up being super useful in Chicago. A little bit less so in Albany, but it was great nonetheless. And then biopsych, it was really fun. It was fun to learn about. The human mind is amazing. I think, I say that we don't get to learn about anything else now, but I think the psychology of plastic surgery is really quite interesting as well. So
yeah, well, that's exactly what I was thinking about when you were saying you wanted to be in a field where you could impact immediate change. And ironically, I feel like what I do, I want to impact significant change for people, but it's this long process. And so I'm kind of late to the game, but so fascinated with the brain and psychology and how even belief systems impact how you approach your business and things like that. And
totally.
So, I mean, we could get into a whole conversation about, like, I can only imagine how, well, obviously speaking multiple languages could help you in any field. I mean, doctor, no doctor, but especially being a physician, but also understanding, there's some complexities within plastic surgery, like body dysmorphic disorder. And, I think ultimately, I will go to battle with people that talk about how superficial are the aesthetic spaces. And I'm like, wait a minute, people literally they're new human beings. Like they have a new outlook on life, a new self-esteem, right? I really do think they are very much connected.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more, with you. I think that is the biggest misconception about plastic surgery is that it's purely breast augmentations and butt lifts. I mean, in residency, especially 99.999% of the stuff we do is purely reconstructive. We are doing limb salvage after these horrific motor vehicle accidents and, the guy's going to lose their leg or we're going to reconstruct it for them. That's the kind of stuff, we do more often than anything. So, and even in the aesthetic space, I think it's really powerful. What we can do for these patients is it matches how you feel on the inside to what you look like on the outside.
Yes.
And that is a powerful thing. It changes your confidence. It changes how you present yourself to the world. I mean, there's so much data on how looking better makes you feel better. So
yeah, no question. So tell me a little bit, I didn't realize you were born in India, so which tells me probably your parents probably have a history too, and the whole process of coming here. Tell me a little bit about that. And also I want to hear about some of the hurdles that you had to accomplish, because, you make it sound like, well, I chose this and did that and it was so fun. I mean, for me, the hurdle is just going to school for that long. Like the minute I got my business degree, I was like, I'm out of that. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, that is still a hurdle I'm going through. Sometimes I'm like, I can't believe, But yeah, as you mentioned, I wasn't born here. I immigrated when I was 2. And I think that was my parents. They're such wonderful, supportive human beings, but they were so afraid I would lose touch with my Indian identity and my culture that they just didn't speak English to me or to anyone. And so I showed up to school on my very first day, not speaking a lick of English.
Wow.
So they would literally send me notes pinned home on my sweater being like, Deepa is going to fail kindergarten unless she learns English.
Wow.
Isn't that funny? And, ironically, I learned to love English. I joined, this silly little team in elementary school called Battle of the Books because reading was how I learned English. I just would read and read and read. So that was, now it's fine. You think about it and laugh. But in elementary school, it was super traumatic as a kid to not know.
Do your parents apologize or do they think it's funny? They think it made you tough?
They're like, yeah, you figured it out, didn't you?
Yeah.
You're like, okay. I guess, but it didn't have to be like that. But I always think it's an interesting experience for immigrant kids navigating the American school system and figuring out, my parents don't know what an SAT is or an ACT is, or it was I guess challenging to figure that out, figure out how to study for them. Like, who had heard of the Princeton Review? Not me,
Yeah, yeah.
So it put a new level of intricacy on making it through high school and applying to college. And then once you get there, you have to figure out how to navigate medical school, which I think is a little bit less known to people universally studying for the MCAT. But honestly, I would say my biggest hurdle that I've faced to this day is once I got into plastic surgery. So what a lot of people don't know about me is that I did 2 years of general surgery. I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like I said, I just loved the reconstruction part of it so much more. And I didn't love operating in the bowel as much. So I decided to take a hiatus. I essentially kind of quit general surgery and I moved to Baltimore for a year and did a year of research at Johns Hopkins. And that was really scary because I had essentially just left a super stable job that if I stayed and, saw to completion, I'd be done in 3 more years. I left. I didn't know a single soul in Baltimore. I had never worked in a lab before. It was a tissue engineering lab. And come on, I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it was a lot going on in a very short amount of time. But, I look back on it and it was the best thing that I ever did for myself because it helped me, I was able to make a lateral move after that year and my mentor helped me find a job in plastic surgery residency. And it was really, I think, once I got to Albany is when the real struggle started because I came in as a 3rd-year resident. And, I think the vast majority of plastic surgery residents will say that they knew they wanted to do plastics very early in med school. So they honed themselves in their resumes and their research experiences and their medical knowledge.
Their network. Yeah. Whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So then I am inserted in this environment where everyone is like, why do you not know what's going on? You're a 3rd-year resident when I've never
that tissue, girl. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm over here oh my goodness, I've never done a skin graft before. And the intern is walking me through it because I don't know how to do it. So that was, I'll be honest with you, it was brutal. It was the hardest thing I have ever done is catching up years and years of experience that other people had into months. I had months to catch up.
So what did it take for you to do that? Did you have to put more hours in? Did it take more of I'm thinking, gosh, I would be having all kinds of thoughts about myself. I would be wondering if this was right, if I would be able to do it. I would be more concerned about my positivity, What did it take for you to catch up, so to speak?
That's a great question. Some great points you made because yes, it was all of the above where I was I don't know if I'm capable of doing this. But for me, it took really taking charge of my own education, realizing that I had to somehow, a residency, they say is 80 hours a week. Sometimes it's more. And outside those hours, it's taking charge of the fact that you are missing out on several years that other people got. So just getting that experience outside of work, study, I read twice as much. I had more to learn. I offered to take extra calls when I didn't have to because I wanted to be at the hospital more. I wanted to see new consults. I wanted to, try and catch up to the experience that everyone else benefited from. So it was not easy, but I think it was all stuff that I had to do if I wanted to be successful and if I wanted to not just prove to myself, but also to others that I deserved to be there and that I was a good asset.
Mm-hmm. So talk to me about residency program. I want to kind of go through so what are you doing for 80 hours a week in plastic surgery residency? People want to know.
Yeah, I know. I think residency is so nebulous, right? Because you're how are you working for that long? What are you doing?
Do you take out the trash? Yeah.
Sometimes if it'll help over, yes, I will take out the trash. Usually I'm up between 4:30 and 5 every day, just depending on when we're rounding. Rounds are generally anywhere between 5:30 to 6 a.m. is when they start. We round on all of our in-house patients, so our patients that have been admitted and that we're actively taking care of.
So what is that? So like you're going patient to patient and kind of checking up on how they're doing?
Yes, exactly. You look at all of their lab numbers for the day. You look at their ins and outs for the previous day, like how much did they take in versus what was their urine output, et cetera. You make sure that any new cultures that came back that you sent, like microbiology cultures, make sure they're not growing anything funny, no new bacteria, making sure that they're on the appropriate antibiotics in the morning. And then going in, seeing how they're feeling, doing a physical exam, because a lot of what we do is, making sure our flaps are viable, making sure our reconstruction is sturdy, making sure our patients are compliant with keeping their arms elevated if they've had hand surgery, and just generally making sure nothing funny is brewing under our dressings. And that, takes a significant amount of time in the morning. And we usually wrap up rounds around 7 a.m. And then we do something called Run the List. And Run the List is where we go through every single patient and we discuss how they're doing. And then we come up with a plan. So then we'll be like, okay, patient SG looks, not that great. Maybe we should get an infectious disease consult and, let's get a chest X-ray to rule out pneumonia or something if they have an elevated infection count. And then we do that for all of our patients. And then 7:30 is when the operating room starts. So then we run to pre-op if you're operating that day, which if you're a senior resident, you more than likely are operating. You meet your patient, you mark them so everyone knows that you're operating on the nose and not the elbow. And then you wheel your patient back or you help and the operating room starts. The day starts at 7:30 and, it's so variable in terms of how long your days are in the OR. If you can be doing 6 to 7 cases, maybe in the peds OR where you're just doing little lumps and bumps on babies, or maybe you're doing longer cases like a cleft palate, or then maybe you're doing a really long case where you're doing a free flap reconstruction, which is where you take a piece of tissue from one part of the body, transfer it to another, and then use a microscope to put these teeny, teeny, tiny blood vessels together. And,
wow.
Our team was in the OR till 2 a.m. last week doing one of these cases.
Dang.
So you start at 7:30 and then the next thing you know, it's 2 a.m. So
wow.
So and that is how
you see on Grey's Anatomy, like you can't go to the restroom and stuff. So you have to.
Oh my gosh. No, Luckily, I think the longest I have gone without taking a break was probably 7 p.m. And, you look at the clock and you're like, I have not ate, drank, or been to the bathroom for 12 hours. This can't be good for me. So I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back. I promise.
Yeah, no, biology. Well, that's right? Intermittent fasting fad. So
yes, exactly. That's what I'm doing.
Up to that. Yeah. Okay. And then, so what happens? So then you're in your 5th year, right? So then what happens now?
In terms of what? In terms of like
what's the next step?
Okay. So 5th year is when I apply for fellowship. Fellowships are, variable in when you apply. I believe the craniofacial match is actually when you're a chief. So you apply your 6th year, but I'm planning on applying to an aesthetic fellowship. And that's something that happens my 5th year. So it's crazy because I feel like I still have such a long way to go, but yet I'm already thinking about the next step and figuring it out. And in reality, I have like under 2 years to go. So it's not very long at all.
Okay. So you mentioned, you're at the finish line, girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then the real fun starts. So you mentioned you had a mentor at Johns Hopkins who helped you get into the program that you're in.
Yes.
Is that somebody, or is there someone else in your life that really, you have had to look up to that's inspired you to become who you are today?
That's an interesting question because I don't think that there is one specific individual that has, every time I think I'm in trouble or I'm struggling, I think of that one individual. I think it is a collection of people, of mentors and like powerful females, honestly, that I've met along the way that have really impacted my life. My mentor at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Sachs, he's fabulous. I think the world of him. And without him, I wouldn't be in this position today. But also it's through books I read and through other women mentors and female surgeons I meet. And there's so much data actually to show that females that have exposure to other female surgeons are way more likely to go into surgery. And so it starts with the breast surgeons that I was rotating with as a medical student. They were, smart, fabulous, could operate like no other, and they were happy people. So starting from there, I think it's just women that I aspire to be like. And in some cases, I think of who I want to be in a couple of years and think if my actions are aligning with my future self and who I want to be. And that also really helps me a lot to make sure that I'm staying on the right track and keeping up with my goals.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point about female mentors, because we as women, we are just, I think, in ways born with this in limiting belief that you kind of have to pick, like you can't just be it all or have it all, air quotes.
Yeah.
But to see somebody successfully balance for whatever that means. And I think I use the word balance loosely because I think that the key is being happy and being fulfilled at what you do. It doesn't mean you have to have anything. You could just have that, and having a voice, right, in an environment where it just has traditionally been kind of a man's world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that there is so much work yet to be done with females in the surgical field. It's a topic I'm very passionate about because I do think we need more diverse female leadership. Right now, only 15% of board-certified plastic surgeons across the entire country are female, which is mind-boggling to me. And even less of them are, in academic medicine. And I think that the numbers are definitely shifting very favorably. Over 50% of the residents in our program are female. I know so many female plastic surgery residents. So I think, in maybe 10 to 15 years, we'll see that the numbers are a lot different.
Right. So we talked a little bit in our chat before this podcast about something called imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I loved, and it was kind of an afterthought because as we just were rambling along and then, kind of came up toward the end of our conversation. And so I wanted to give it some time to kind of dig in on that because I don't know, I had to kind of like think of it after about, you hear that term and sometimes I think you don't realize you're having it until you've kind of worked yourself through it. And then you're like, oh, wait, that's just me doubting myself, like not believing I could become that. So talk to me a little bit about what that means for you and has meant for you.
Yes. And, after I share my thoughts, I would love to hear yours as well on how you combat it, because I know that it's not an isolated problem. No one really seems to talk about it, but I have to believe every single person suffers from it, some point in their life. And for me, I talk to myself. Sometimes I talk to myself out loud, but it is literally a conversation that I have with myself on a fairly regular basis, I'll admit, where I remind myself that it's literally not possible to get through college and med school and, mostly through residency without at least somewhat being qualified. These are smart people you're around. Like, it would be foolish of me to think that I could fool anyone for that long, right?
Yeah.
If I didn't know what I was doing, I would have been figured out by now. So it's a daily reminder that I do have worked hard and I deserve to be here, and I go through the data in my head, and it's not like an exercise in self-promotion, but it's really just reminders that, hey, listen, like you got through the MCAT, you passed your STEP exams, you did fine on your in-service, your patients really like you, your co-residents enjoy working with you, and your attendings have given you positive feedback. So there's literally no reason on God's green earth that you don't deserve to be here and that you can't finish, that, you're not on the right track when all of the data shows you that you are on the right track. And
exactly.
Kind of depersonalizing it helps me, because then you think of it from like a third person perspective, right? You're like, well, how would you view someone that has all of this? Would you view them as a fake or, an imposter? And it's not true. With that being said, it's not like it doesn't get to me. It still gets to me. And I think that maybe there's this perception that the further along you get or the higher in the ranks that you climb, the less that it's an issue because maybe you build your confidence. But for me, sometimes I almost think it worsens because the further I get through my medical education and the ranks of, first being an intern, then a junior resident, and now a senior resident, I'm like, well, there are less and less people that are exactly like me. And I think that that's also where promoting females and diversity within medicine helps, because once you see more role models and more people like yourself, you're like, she did it, I can do it. Instead of being like, oh my God, I know of 3 people that have done this.
Yeah. So did you, as a cognitive brain scientist, did you study this, or is this kind of more of this is a life circumstance development?
I have to say I didn't really study it in college. I hadn't even heard of imposter syndrome until, I want to say, medical school, where it's really rampant. And there's a lot of, I always quote the literature and research because I'm big on numbers, but, there's so much research to show that females suffer from imposter syndrome so much more than men do. And that's also a good reminder to be like, hey, my colleague over there who's a male seems like he has all the confidence in the world. And, you're in the same place that they are. So why wouldn't you have that same level of confidence?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, and I'm no doctor, but I think it could go back to just our primitive ancestry and how we're built as human beings. And as women, just for thousands and thousands of years, we're just programmed to almost to resist competition, to resist conflict, to resist the things that you constantly have to embrace to achieve great things. And, ultimately it's a lot of hard work. And whether somebody's willing to put the work in or not, that's one piece of it. But being able to have put those blinders on and stay focused on, this is me and my journey and my path, and not look externally. I think that's a harder thing, because we want acceptance. We want to make friends. We want everyone to like us. I mean, I look at you and you're this young, beautiful, brilliant woman. You probably have a few haters out there. I'm just saying.
It's true. It comes down to it. You do you and ignore the noise, right? Because I have learned, and maybe we'll talk about this later, like advice you give to your younger self, but no matter what you do, people will have an opinion about it. People will talk about you. People will have something to say. And honestly, how can I say this? They're not living your life, they're not you, and your experience is personal and different from theirs. And I often find that it is people whose opinions that I wouldn't seek out in the first place that have these, opinions of me. So
yes. Well, I could think of even a non-business example or non-education example. When my kids were little, I worked full time, willingly. And I remember my mom's next door neighbor, who was just the ultimate mom, hopscotch, Girl Scout troop leader, all of that. And she came up to me one day and said, Kaylee, are you sure you want a nanny raising your kids? And that just never left me. Left me. And then a month ago, I was out, she ran by and saw me at the park kicking the soccer ball around with my little guy. And my mom called me and said, her next door neighbor told her that she just thinks you're the best mom. And I didn't even know how to take this. Is the same woman, how to take that. Yeah. But it kind of put everything in perspective for me. For, 10 years ago, I'm the worst mom, and now I'm the best mom. Yes. And I'm the same mom I was the whole time, Yes, and exactly. So I think it just reinforces the point that people are going to have their opinions, and you're going to have people who agree with you or like what you're doing or don't. And ultimately you just have to be in your own aisle and do it so it's self-serving. Otherwise you're going to be miserable. Right?
I couldn't agree more.
So tell me I was going to ask you about the best advice you would give to your 20-year-old self. Do you think it would be related to that?
That and to remember, when we're 20, I think that it seems that not everything you do matters. And, you let this slide and that slide and you're like, oh, whatever. But I would, if I could go back and talk to my 20-year-old self, I would tell her that everything you do matters. And you may not see it immediately, but it does. And, even when you're in college, just everything from not sleeping in and making it to your 8 a.m. orgo lab, which isn't always speaking from experience, the most exciting thing to do. Down to every suture now that you're placing in a patient, like every single stitch matters, every single thing you do matters. And you're doing yourself a disservice by not treating your life as such.
Wow, that is so profound. And I love that advice. I was not expecting that. Because I guess, I think we're so focused. I don't know why I automatically went to this, but we're thinking about big moves, right? So 10 years, I thought you were going to say just trust the process. It's going to happen for you. But I actually really respect you for what you just said, because what you're saying is that it's all of those little things that develop habits in our life. It develops our character. It's, a lot of people call me and say, how do I create a brand for myself? Right? Your brand is who you are. And that happens from that stitch, from that waking up early, from doing the things you don't want to do, from developing a character and a mindset around facing adversity, all of the things that are ultimately going to shape and kind of collide into this big old exponential bubble of awesomeness later.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's all built on small habits that you create from, day one that shows other people who you are and the kind of person you are, and ultimately the kind of surgeon you will be and how you'll care for your patients. So,
wow, I love that. Okay, so I want to hear what's next for you. So you said that you're applying to an aesthetic fellowship. What is the future? Which you did share with me that your wedding is postponed because of COVID, which is cray-cray. Yes. So there is a wedding to come.
Yes, which is so exciting. We're doing a destination wedding, but it's a blessing and a curse, because I obviously, no one wants to have their wedding postponed, but at least now, it's not in the middle of fellowship applications and this and that. So I guess there's my silver lining. But I'm applying to aesthetic fellowships this fall, which, it's crazy. It's coming up so quickly. And, in the future, my parents are in Florida. My fiance's family's in Florida. So I'd really like to go set up shop down there. Mm-hmm. And, perhaps whether it be joining a group there or setting up my own private practice, that's ultimately my goal. So I'm really, really excited, because I feel like things are really moving now. I'm in that vital stretch, like we were saying, and I'm so excited for the future, because not because I know it's going to be wonderful and perfect and amazing, but just because I'm excited to start a new chapter, and knowing that even though it might be an uphill battle or, may not come very easily, but just doing it anyways and seeing what happens. So,
yeah. Well, that's the journey of the sweetness of life, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, you heard her, Florida docs who are listening to this. Sweep her up before she's taken. All right, so this is my final, my closing question for all of my guests on the podcast. What does having the Fierce Factor mean to you?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and I have thought about it. And for me, I think that it is pursuing things that are not a sure thing, and doing it with grit and confidence and vigor and coming out on top. And you will find that oftentimes it is not the smartest or best or fastest person that gets things done. It's the one that has the most grit and perseveres and knows that as long as you hang on and ride the wave, you'll get through it. And I think that needs a lot of fierceness. So that's what it is to me.
I love that. The girl who went home from kindergarten with signs taped on her.
Yes.
Yes. That's it. That's not fierce. I don't know what is. Awesome. This has been so wonderful. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else that maybe you want to share, closing thoughts for the people listening today?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This is actually so much fun. This is my first podcast.
Look at you. You're a pro now.
Yeah. So this was so much fun. Thank you for making it so easy. In closing, I just want to tell anybody listening that I am a huge advocate for mentorship and helping other women out, and not just women, but helping others out. But I do think I would be more helpful to females. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, if you want advice, if you want anything at all, please feel free to reach out to me, because it brings me great joy to help others that are in similar situations. So,
oh, that's so awesome. So where can people find you and also follow you and check out Life Through Loops and all of that too?
Yeah, so I'm probably most active on my Instagram handle, which is Deepa Bhat, MD. So I am always available through that. And, you can find me very easily on the web through Albany Med's emails as well. So I am available and would love to chat.
Awesome. So we'll hook that up in the show notes. So if you are watching this on your iPhone, you can scroll down and go follow Dr. Bhat on IG. She has a beautiful Instagram and does some inspirational interviews as well with other women in our space and other industries, just people who are making moves and supporting each other. So thank you again. It's been wonderful. It's so good to learn about you. So I have a favor to ask.
Yes.
Will you come back on in a year and catch us up on, the year's progress?
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. I would love to.
Okay, yes. Awesome. Because maybe we can life up. I think it's about the journey, Yes, and so, someday you're going to be like, remember that interview? And I think it would be really cool to kind of track the progress.
Well, I'll always remember it. Yeah, the first one. So that's a great idea. Thank you. I'd love it.
Cool. Awesome. I'll look forward to that. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhat. Take care.
Okay. Bye. Have a good one. Bye, Kelly.
Bye. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Fierce Factor. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you subscribe so you can automatically get new shows every week. I'd also love it if you left us a review. And come join the conversation online. If you're an aesthetic industry owner, operator, or leader, please join my free Facebook group, The Tribe of Fierce Aesthetic Leaders, a community of ambitious, purpose-driven professionals who collaborate and share best practices for growth in business and life. I'm honored you tuned in.